Ora koutou katoa, he karakia tīmatana tēnei. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pauna mu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. Ora.
Thank you, Ronya. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Salam alaikum. I'm Sakhar Munastar, the kai pakahare kopapa for Hui E. Welcome to our first webinar of the year with Match Te Puna Taurite. If you haven't been to one of these before, we do these on a seasonal basis, and this is the first one of 4 that we're doing in the month of March. We'll be posting links to the next ones as we go and in the follow-up email. But to introduce you to Hui E, if you've never been to one of our webinars before, we're a peak body for the tangata whenua community and volunteer sector in Aotearoa, which means that we basically navigate a space where we bridge the gap between government, funders, community organizations, and the volunteer sector. I'm fairly new to the roles. I started in October last year, and with COVID, time's shortened, as you all know. So I'm hoping you're all keeping safe with all of that. In today's webinar, we'll hear from Owain, who's Match Te Puna Taurite's manager. If you have any questions while Owain is presenting, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll ask him at the end. But we'll also have time towards the end of the webinar where we can have a more open Q&A session, but also for kind of like a conversation, having a flow. We'll close the webinar at 1 p.m., but we'll also keep the space for about 15 to 30 minutes after that for a more casual korero. So if you want to stay, tell us about your organization, what you've been doing, what you're up to. We'd love for you to stay post that. So if you've never heard of Match Te Puna Taurite before, I've had the pleasure of knowing Owain and the team for a bit now, and they're leading with an incredible project that is going to bring more access to funders and more accessible and equitable one. So please, Owain, tell us all about Match Te Puna Taurite.
Kia ora tātou. Thanks so much for that warm welcome, Sakir, and thanks for inviting me to speak at the Hui E session today. It's a pleasure to be here. Ko Owain tōku ingoa. I'm lucky enough to be the Match Te Puna Taurite manager, and a little bit like Sakir, I've joined the organisation fairly recently, and that was in order to bring Match Te Puna Taurite to life, which is not far from launching at the end of this month now. So I joined in August last year, and it's been a great journey so far. So what I'll do today is run you through the basics around what Match Te Puna Taurite is, and really welcome those questions, and would love to korero afterwards as well. So I'll just share my screen and we'll jump into things. Ronya, can you give me a thumbs up that you can see that? Welcome to this presentation. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the team. So this is an initiative run by Philanthropy New Zealand. We're a small team, but we're an effective one. I'm the match manager. We've got Sue McGabe, who is the CEO at Philanthropy New Zealand. So this has really been her baby from the start. So a big shout out to herself and her vision to bring this to where it is today. We've also got the lovely Lily McFarlane, who's joined us as the Match Te Puna Taurite coordinator. So if you're a charity in particular and you're going to be involved with Match Te Puna Taurite, it's very likely you might be in touch with her at some point. And then we've got Neil O'Styke as well, who's our project manager, who's a bit of a man of many talents, but in particular he's focused on the IT component of what we're doing, the website and the platform that is key to the project. I thought I'd just share a small amount about why I'm interested in this space, and that'll flow on to some of the outcomes that I'm excited for from what we're doing. Prior to joining Philanthropy New Zealand, I was part of a small not-for-profit over the last 3 or 4 years, involved in the environmental education space, and we were having a big impact in that sector, and we're really enjoying the mahi But one thing that we always found really difficult was how to find sustainable funding, and in particular, even just knowing where to look for access to funders or financial support that wasn't overly burdensome from an administrative perspective on our time, which I know is a common issue when you're a small charity looking to raise funds. Post that experience, I thought, wow, if that was our experience of how difficult it was to find funding, I would love to be part of some sort of contribution to making that easier and more accessible for charities to access funding. And that's how I've ended up being welcomed onto Philanthropy New Zealand. So a bit more about Match. So our vision. Match Te Puna Taurite has a vision of a more equitable, accessible and collaborative funding system. So a few key objectives that sit within that. One is equity. So some of you might have seen the report that came out in 2020 from JB Ware that really highlighted some of those existing inequities in the distribution of philanthropic funding across organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand. One specific statistic that really hits home is that 91% of philanthropic funding in 2020, but still applicable now, went to 9% of charities. So that's 91% of philanthropic money of that available pool of money that went to just 9% of charities. Now there's some justification for why such a small percentage of charities received the majority of funding. For instance, some of them are doing, are really large charities doing a lot of work. But I think for a lot of people that really emphasized, along with the feeling and experiences that many of us have had in smaller charities, that there are too many barriers for small groups accessing funding to do the work that they need. And ultimately that means that it's less efficient and less empowering than it could be in terms of the funding sector. So hand in hand with equity, so just to recap on equity, we're looking to help right that balance to uplift those smaller charities in particular. Hand in hand with equity, we've got access. So access to the funding system, again, is an issue that Philanthropy New Zealand and others have noticed for a long time. Who do you turn to look for funding? Where's that first step, but also how do you prioritize the potentially multiple avenues that you have, or multiple grant rounds that you have available to apply. So through Match Te Puna Taurite, again, we're looking to increase that accessibility to accessing the funding that you need. The third part is collaboration. So this in particular relates to funders. So Match Te Puna Taurite has got two main user groups. You've got your fund seekers and your funders. Collaboration is all about how do we get those funders to come together and collaborate more around supporting different initiatives, again, to produce better outcomes for those charities on the receiving ends of funders' decision making. And overall through this, what we hope to do is help stimulate change within the funding sector towards a better, fairer and a more effective and more efficient funding sector. So here's a bit more detail around what the nuts and bolts are. So Match Te Puna Taurite is a service designed to facilitate more effective connection between funders and fund seekers. So that's the key piece there, is we're looking to connect funders with fund seekers. It consists primarily of an online platform. So that's what we're developing at the moment. That will be released shortly. And it will be a place where fund seekers upload their funding needs. And then on the other end of that spectrum, on the other end of the system, is funders have the ability to understand what the need is out in the community from different fund seekers. So I'll run through a few of these bullet points. So from a fund seeker's end, you can upload requests to have the chance to be seen by multiple funders at once. So you've got a profile where you maintain your basic bio around what it is you do, and then you can upload additional specifics around funding requests that you may have for your organization. So it might be a project, a tree planting project, for instance, with a discrete time frame, or it might be as broad as we've got 50K of overheads per year, and no more details than that. So I'm happy to answer some more questions around kind of how that might look or feel as we go, but we're looking to make that as adaptable basically as we can for fund seekers. So you can choose whether you want to upload a lot of information or upload just the very minimum to enable funders to find you, and that kind of thing. So again, that's covered off that second point. Third point, so you've got access to a support service and resources. So this is something we're looking to develop as we go. As I introduced the team before, you can see we're a small team, so our ability to provide direct support is limited in terms of actually, say, writing those profiles for you. But what we do want to make sure is that we provide some targeted support to some of the key groups that we're looking to uplift. And also make sure that we can respond to make sure that it's a good experience for everybody using it. Final point is we'll be looking to collect fund seeker voice, fund seeker feedback, because we know that fund seekers have a lot of great insight into things that could be better in the funding system, or things that are going well. And we want to highlight those and bring them to the fore, bring them to funders in a powerful way. On the other side of this platform, we've got the funders. So the benefit for them is that they get an overview of all of the fund seekers, both the organizations, but also those funding requests, if the fund seekers chose to upload those, as categorized by different regions. So that piece, imagine maybe a little bit like TradeMe, where you can search for different sectors depending on what you're looking for. Funders, often operate in a certain area or to certain beneficiaries, and so they'll be able to filter for the relevant fund seekers or funding requests that fit their funding stipulations. Those categories are self-identified by the fund seekers. So when you create your profile, you say we're operating in the Waikato, we are working with youth, and so on and so forth. Happy again to share more on those details if people are interested. From the funders' end, once they've found a group of fund seekers that they're interested in, and may have read some of the information that they've uploaded onto their profiles, funders can initiate that connection with the fund seeker. So important to note there that fund seekers can't initiate the connection through Match Te Puna Taurite with funders. It's only from funders to fund seekers. And the reason for that is because there's the risk otherwise of funders being overwhelmed with communication from fund seekers. And yeah, again, can speak more to that. So what will happen there is funders that are interested in the fund seekers will connect with them, and then you'll take communication offline. So after that, you may have to go through the usual due diligence, or even apply through their grant rounds. But at least you've had that first conversation, and we hope that funders wouldn't ask you to go further than that if they weren't really interested in the potential of funding the fund seeker. Cool. And the last point here is around that collaboration again. So again, we'll be hosting forums for funders to help educate them on thought leadership, and including enabling them to collaborate better in response to crises, be that say the White Island or Christchurch earthquakes, those kinds of things. We're looking to create some ability for funders to come together quickly and collaborate around how to best support those charities on the ground that are doing that on the ground mahi. Down the bottom here, I've got the service will have tiered fees, but be free for tier 4, which is those with operating expenses under 140,000 a year. to use. And I will share those, the fee structure in a moment as well. Cool, so just a few things that Match Te Puna Taurite isn't, just for clarity. So it's not a guaranteed place to acquire funding. So we can't promise that if you, as a fund seeker, upload a profile, that funders will be in touch with you, or that funders will end up funding you. What we hope it does is reduce the admin that you'd otherwise have to do, and increase your chances. It's not generally a place for non-registered charities to acquire funding. Got an asterisk there because we are trialling a pilot on the East Cape at the moment, where we're welcoming some kaupapa Māori groups, which is one of our key groups that we're wanting to uplift, to create profiles. And some of the reasons around needing to keep it to registered charities is to provide some level of guarantee to funders that are using the platform, that the groups that are asking for money have some sort of accountability on how they spend that money. Again, that's something that we'd love to explore further as we progress, but we've also got to be realistic about our capacity to verify people, for instance, and what kind of wider consequences that could have, or implications. I've already touched on that third point, and the fourth point is, yeah, it's not a replacement service. So in line with, it's not a guaranteed place to acquire funding. This isn't a your complete answer to finding funding. There's awesome other organisations such as Hui E, which we're obviously on with now, strategic grants, and a number of others that have got existing support services and mechanisms set up to help charities and other nonprofits find the funding they need. So we're looking to really sit in that space that isn't provisioned for at the moment, which is around minimizing admin for charities. So it's like one place where you can upload your needs once and have the chance of being seen by multiple funders. And from the funders end, it's a place where they can actually understand what is that need out there, which is quite difficult to understand for a lot of funders in the current reality. Cool. So that's a bit about the kind of how it works, and again, welcome questions. And one thing that people are always asking, rightfully so, is does the service cost? So you can see the tiered fee structure there, and of course this is to make sure that we can continue it on in the future. We've currently got funding for the first 3 years, which is fantastic to develop this. But as we progress, it needs to become self-supporting. So that's what this is reflecting. Importantly there, in line with our key objectives of increasing equity and access, it's free for Tier 4 charities, which is the majority of charities in New Zealand. I think there's 28,000 or so charities. I think around 22,000 are Tier 4. So most of them have free access to this. In addition, there a little plug for if you sign up and get on board early, that means this April or May, then you've got an additional 20% discount. And if you're a Philanthropy New Zealand member, that mostly applies to funders, you can get an additional 30% off the prices. So I just wanted to touch and give a big shout out to these amazing funders that have made this all possible. Excuse me. So we've had the backing of some of the biggest funders in New Zealand, because they know that, or because this has been an issue that has been talked about for a long time, is how do we address some of these issues that we hope we can address with Match Te Puna Taurite. So you can see some of those there. We've got Weave, which was previously the Working Together More Fund, which is a collaboration of family foundations and trusts. And we've got things like the Todd Foundation, J.R. Mackenzie, as well as some great governmental support from DIA, Department of Internal Affairs, and Ministry for the Environment and such. So we're really thankful to these funders, and I think important to note, or to make a special mention of, this is an initiative being driven by funders to create and contribute to systemic change in the funding system. I know as a fund seeker in my previous life, it's easy to get quite frustrated when you may get declined applications or, are really struggling to find funding. So I've personally taken, I've been boosted by the extra insight I have now into those funders that are looking for supporting that positive change, which are these ones in this instance. Sweet. So final slide here is launching this month. So we're really excited. It's been developed for over a year now. It started, even in late 2020 was when the initial kind of ideas were being spread around and kind of gauging people's feedback and interest from fund seekers and funders. Then we acquired funding early last year, and developments began since mid 2021. So we've had a rapid development period now that we're just in the midst of, and we're really excited to be launching shortly. So there's a few things there that you could do to either stay in the loop, and Sakir can share that after the Hui or whenever's relevant. And then other things there in terms of this initiative will work best if we have high user numbers. So if we have a lot of charities showing their need, that will give an accurate or a more accurate representation of the true need across different communities. Likewise, if we have a lot of funders using this, then the effectiveness of being seen by multiple funders is greater. So basically what I'm trying to ask here is, if you are excited about or interested in what this could mean for your nonprofit or for your funder network, please be in touch, or just share some of the posts that we have on Facebook, LinkedIn, that kind of thing. So we're looking to get as many people on board as quickly as we can. Ngā mihi, thank you for your time. Back to you, Sakir.
Kia ora, thank you, Owen. We have a lot of questions in the chat, and I tried to group some of them within categories that fit. And we will share the newsletter, the link to the newsletter in the chat very soon too. One of the questions that was repeated, Owen, was about unregistered groups or non-for-profit, so incorporate societies, social enterprise that have a non-for-profit clause in their constitution. Can they apply or not?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and that's something that we get asked a lot. So for sorry, I just dropped my pen. For MVP, so for this initial launch, we are needing to be fairly strict around who we let on, and in the first instance, it's really for legally registered charities, and we know that excludes a number of groups that are genuinely non-profit, but for whatever reason they've chosen not to be a legally registered charity. Reasons for that are a few. One is simply capacity on our end in terms of being able to verify those non-legally registered groups, but also dealing or how do we consider, or how do we make the call around who is legitimately non-profit and who is maybe a bit of a hybrid, say if you're social enterprise, or I guess there's a whole potential spectrum there. And then the other point that I was going to say, which I touched on before, is for funders to have the assurance that this platform is useful for them. A lot of them will only be interested in using the platform if we can, show yes, it's for registered charities. So we're trying to find that balance between how do we uplift non-profits as best we can, but also how do we provide something of value to funders so that they use this.
No, thank you. But just not to put you on the spot, but is this a no done, or is it something that with capacity and maybe in a few years you might consider?
Yes, cool. So I was going to add a little bit on there. So thanks, keep putting me on the spot. That's good. So it is something that we want to consider, and it's something that's definitely on our that's our intent. As mentioned, we're already progressing talks with kaupapa Māori groups in the East Cape, that aren't necessarily legally registered charities, to provide, or to trial kind of how that might be received, or how that might work on the platform if they're not legally registered. And if that goes well, then we're going to be looking at, cool, how do we expand that? But we'll just have to be careful in our approach of, who are we targeting first? Some of the key groups that we'd love to uplift, in particular through what we're doing, are kaupapa Māori, Pacifica, ethnic communities, disabled and rainbow communities. So we'd probably look to start kind of with those groups in particular, and how do we encourage them to be seen by funders, and beyond that, we'll have to consider how we might open that up to others. I know there's we've had questions from schools, for instance, asking, can we use the platform? So we know there's a number of other users or potential users that would be interested in getting involved.
Well, thank you. And I'm just going through the questions that have been put in the chat. So if you have a new question, please write it there. And if I'm done with the questions that you've asked in the chat, just please use the hand up feature if you want to use some of the time we have left. So a follow-up question from that, Owen, was, can a fund holder be used for a non-registered group? So umbrella organizations, are they able to do that?
Cool. Yeah, it's a good question. So that's something that we're exploring, but again, just upon launch, we won't be enabling in the first instance, but we do know that there's certain fund holders that have expressed interest in, and have had charities express interest, or sorry, not charities, non-profits that aren't legally registered charities express interest to them, that could be useful. So what was an example? Like I've lost it now, but yeah, in terms of if there was a fund holder that groups were kind of associated with, that would provide some level of verification that would enable it more easily for us on our end. So I guess the short answer is not upon launch, but something again that we'd love to consider.
Yeah. And just a short plug for us this time. Next week, we're having a conversation with an umbrella organization and the Open and Gift Collective. And they kind of provide a similar service about what to do if you're a non-registered group and want to seek funding, and what are the alternatives to that. So that's next Wednesday, and we'll also share the link in the follow-up email. Okay, and we have another question here, and it asks about national charities who have different branches in different areas. So the question says that they have different budgets and activities and fundraising activities, but then they don't have a separate charity status. So will they have to apply as one national charity, or can they apply as a branch?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how it would be set up at the moment is that you'd have one charity profile, and then within that you would be uploading your individual funding requests with those different needs from those different areas. Exactly how that would work in terms of how that might look in your profile still would need to be worked through from our end. But yeah, we're aware that a number of charities are bigger than just one area, and also might want more than one administrator, for instance, or person from their end contributing to their profile on Match. So we're taking that into consideration as well.
Thank you. And a question from Annette about, and I think you've talked about this in the presentation briefly, but what's the reasoning behind the fees for tier 1, 2, and 3 currently?
Yeah, cool. So I guess it's that tricky piece around how do we ensure that we can continue to provide this service into the future. And yes, we've got some great support from some of those seed funders that I showed before, but their support has been is on the basis that we can self-provide, on an ongoing way. So we've considered, what do we think is an affordable amount for those different charities to contribute to the ongoing provision of the service.
Sweet, thank you. And one last question from the chat is, who are the funders? Are they existing philanthropists who will utilize the platform, or new funders, new businesses?
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of the actual the users that will join once we go live, we don't have certainty over exactly who those are, but what we do have knowledge over is those funders that have actually actively contributed to us creating this, which again is some of those leading philanthropic organisations in New Zealand, and also that we've got that we've had a lot of wider sector support through conversations that we have with many of our networks through Philanthropy New Zealand. So in terms of, who might use the platform, it could be a whole spectrum of, foundations or high net worth individuals or government departments. We won't know for certainty until we actually go live. But yeah, we have really widespread support, which has been awesome.
Perfect. Yes.
The additional thing that's relevant there. So if you're a fund seeker considering, is this worth my time? On the platform, on the public facing part of it, we'll show which funders have created profiles, for instance. Likewise, we'll also show which charities are using the platform. So you've got some sort of indicative feel about, is this potentially worth my time or not?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we had one question about the fees. Were they monthly or per year?
Oh, whoops. Those are yearly, annual subscription. Yeah.
That's good. It's not like Netflix or any of those then. And one last question from Kodrian here, and he's saying are there any funders in the list already? So you mentioned some of the people who funded the project that they're keen to be part of it.
Yeah.
Or is this just an invite to start inviting funders to join as well?
What was that last part?
So are there any current people that you already have signed up to be funders,
Right,
or is this just an invitation so that when the platform launch, then you will know who's
Yeah, so it's just an invitation at this stage. We haven't seen reason to actually try and get kind of early commitment beyond the conversations that we've had. But yeah, again, we've had wide sector support. In terms of how many funders we're hoping to attract in the first couple of months, we're looking at around 70 or 75. But we really don't know until we launch. In terms of Philanthropy New Zealand, we've got around 150 to 200 philanthropic members. And again, that represents a large proportion of those major funders in New Zealand. So we're going to be encouraging them to sign up.
Perfect. And one last question from me, and we've talked about this briefly, is about groups that some of the groups we work with don't have the capacity or the knowledge, skills to navigate online platforms, signups, and all of this. Would you be providing some support to these groups?
Yeah, that's a great question to raise. So our ability internally within the Match Te Puna Taurite team is limited in that regard. So we will be providing some targeted support to some of those groups that I mentioned before, but we won't be able to provide fundraising advice or actively write people's profiles for them. So we'd be needing to kind of look to other services to help us out with that.
Perfect, thank you. And I think we've got one question here from Susan. If the funders you attract don't pick up our need, will you assist with leads for other possible funding sources?
So from our end, we wouldn't do that. So what would happen is you've uploaded your profile, you've created your funding request. We're looking to give you some sort of feedback on how many funders may have viewed your request. But beyond that, if you're finding that you're not being approached by funders more so than usual, for instance, or if you haven't heard any of them be referred to you because of Match, then that's when you'd be, or that's why you'd keep up your other avenues for finding funding potentially. So yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one to know how much emphasis you put towards Match Te Puna Taurite and how much emphasis you continue through your normal applying to grant rounds, that kind of thing. But what we're hoping is that other applications that you've made, for instance, like if it was to another grant round, you could upload that directly to Match. So we're designing this in a way that's hopefully minimizing that additional admin, but maximizing that potential extra exposure that you get to funders.
Thank you. And we've got 2 more questions in the chat. One is, will those other services be listed on the site when it's launched in the platform? And the other one, that whether Match is envisaged to replace Generosity New Zealand.
Cool. Yeah, so good questions. So yes, we'd love to link to all other organizations that we know that also provide support to fund seekers looking to acquire funding. So, again, great example would be Hui E and all the great work that you do, but also, other organizations such as Generosity New Zealand, or Strategic Grants, or the Fundraising Institute of New Zealand. So there's a few other kind of organizations there that already provide services in different ways. So we're looking to provide what we can there in the way of links and things, because I know it can sometimes be hard to work out who to approach. In terms of that question around Generosity New Zealand, so no, we won't be replacing Generosity New Zealand. And similarly, we won't be replacing Give a Little, which is another similar organization but operating in a different space. Generosity New Zealand enables the fund seeker to look for funding opportunities. So you can search for available grants, you can search for funders, but we're flipping that around and saying funders will have the ability through Match to search for the charitable need. So we're really looking, so we have looked and we continue to look to design this in a way that's complementary to those other organizations operating in the space.
Thank you. And one just last question came up. If applications get rejected, do we directly get feedback from the funders on the why, or will the platform be the in-between in this? Also, when applications accepted/rejected, will this show on the platform? So would there be like a success rate? Has this group been funded for that much?
Yeah, cool. So good question. So there won't be feedback in terms of whether you've been accepted or declined based on the funding request. All that would happen is the fund seeker would say that, hey, we need this, this X amount of money for the specific project, and then the connection between the funder and the fund seeker would happen, but then they'd take that comms offline. So all of that would happen off the system. If there was an easy way for us to then feed that back into your profile and say, like, hey, you have, this project's been funded, or this project still doesn't have funding, then that would be an interesting thing to explore. But we have tried to explore kind of the possibilities around, would charities be up for updating their profiles, saying we've had this amount funded, or similarly, would funders be interested in saying, hey, we've funded this group, and we don't think that there's enough of an appetite or incentive for people from either end there to keep them updated to the point that they could be relied on for usefulness. This might be of interest or relevance as well, in terms of an additional kind of feature on your profile is that funders could ask you questions or leave you comments on your profile. So again, imagine Trade Me, where you can ask a question and then everybody else in the that's looking at that auction could see that. We're designing something similar, except that all questions and all comments would have to be accepted by the fund seeker. So the fund seeker has that ability to reject something if they don't think it supports their cause, but they have the ability to accept things like it might be, I'm not sure, maybe like, let's say the Ministry for the Environment have done their due diligence on you, but for whatever reason they couldn't fund you because you sat outside their funding scope. There could be potential for the MFE to jump on and say, hey, checked out this group, welcome, any other funder to get in touch with us if you want, if you want to see the due diligence that we've done, which is positive or something. Anyway, a bit of a long example, but there's ways there for the fund seeker to hopefully minimize the amount of communication they have to do with multiple different funders to communicate the same information.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think the next question kind of just clarifies what you've just said, Owen, which says, am I understanding correctly that you'll be the connector only between the funder and the fund seeker, and the funder will get to decide whether to grant that the funding request or not?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's the big thing. It's really just about showing the visibility and enabling that connection. And then everything beyond that happens as per usual, off Match Te Puna Taurite.
Well, one last question. We've got Paul here with a hand up. I was just going to invite people because I'm kind of getting tired of just the bounce back between me and. So thank you, Paul. Go ahead.
Oh, cheers. Thanks for that. Hey, I've just got a hi, Owen. I've just got a call with Natalia from Weave. She said say hello. This big thanks to, I know you've done a lot of work in here, a lot of behind the scenes work. So thanks to you and the team. But my question was around sort of, I think we all probably understand on this call that there's not enough funding to go around. And I see you talked a bit about sort of a collaborative type ability with the site. So potentially, I know from our perspective, it would be around what's the ability to talk to other charities and potentially collaborate on a project and then pitch that to a funder. What sort of forum is there available for that?
That's a great question, Paul. And it's something that we've been thinking about in terms of, in the initial instance, the collaboration that we're aiming to increase and help with is on the funder end. So how do we bring funders together to make better decisions and not be so isolated in their decision making? But what you've raised is really valid in terms of, often there's charities that would really benefit from being able to just even understand who else in their space is, or who else is working in their kind of area of interest that they might not know about, and therefore on top of that, are there ways that they could combine their skills and expertise to have a more aligned or a more effective kind of approach or pitch to funders. So that's something that we'd like to explore, but won't be available for this initial launch. Certainly, that's, I think, an area that could be really powerful. That would be very interesting.
Cool. Thanks, Owen. Thanks.
Cheers, Paul. Yeah.
Any other questions? It's always that 3-4 seconds of silence before someone jumps in. Otherwise, I can ask all day, so I'll just go back to it.
There's a couple of coming through from Sus.
Yes. So we've got one. We've asked, would you have some sort of visibility or list of funders and the type of project? I'm not sure I understand that.
That's good. Yeah. So the question is, would you have some sort of visibility or list of funders and type of project areas that funders are looking to fund? Again, no is the short answer, but you will be able to see which funders have created profiles on the platform. So what we expect is that there'll be a large, diverse group of funders interested in lots of different things. So I guess, from that perspective, we hope that at least just being able to see that there's a high usership from the funders, and whether that would be worthwhile for your time or not. I think it would be a little bit difficult to try and categorize what funders are looking for, because often they're looking for lots of different things, and it comes down to maybe what projects really just appeal at the time, rather than being too tunnel visioned maybe about that. There was just, while you read that next one as well, Sakira, there was a question that was asked to me directly.
Yes, yeah.
About Justine. So I haven't been checking the chat particularly, so if you have direct messaged me, maybe pop it in the public chat, and Sakira can spot that. But the question was, would you be helping groups in their applications for funding, like a professional CV structure? So we won't be providing one-on-one support in that sense, but we will be providing some examples perhaps of, here's a good way that here's a good way of laying out your application, or again linking to other organizations that support those kinds of things. So we'll be trying to provide as much kind of generalized support as we can within our capacity.
Thank you, Owen. And we've got one from Rochelle. What do you envisage, like the profile, what it would look like what information you'd want to hear more of? Is it going to be like a narrative or like specific details?
Yeah, cool. So there's some required fields, but we've kept those to a minimum, which is just things like your name and contact details. But then also you need to self-identify what areas you operate in. So again, that's like region or beneficiaries, which is the people you serve. You can also self-identify as one of those priority groups that we've talked about in terms of kaupapa Māori or rainbow, so beyond that, then you've got a range of options. So you can either upload existing grant applications that you've made. You can really fill out in depth a biography around who you are and what you do. Or you could upload a video and a link to your website, or if you don't have a website, that's okay. You can just upload a video. So so there's a small amount of kind of required fields that are needed for that, to ensure that there's the functionality that's needed for funders to get use out of this. But beyond that, it's really up to the fund seeker, the charity, to decide what's the best way of me pitching myself. And what's the best use of my time kind of in that regard as well.
A follow-up question, which also I'll link it to my question, is about like how some organizations will have marketing teams. They have people to write these applications for them. So some applications will look a lot better because they have the capacity, or like accessible to the funders because they're used to those applications. And it goes to your first point, Owen, when you said that 91% of the funding went to 9% of the charities. And I know giving tier 4 free membership is one way to address that, but how will you do it when you talk to the funders and kind of give them information?
Yeah, for sure. And we're definitely aware of those more established charities having that greater resource and greater expertise often to pitch themselves in a way that's amenable to what funders are looking for. I guess in that regards, like, we won't be able to change funder behavior overnight, but what we will be doing is promoting better practice from the funders end, and that kind of fits into our wider work with Philanthropy New Zealand, is advocating for better giving and more progressive giving, if you like, in that respect. So we'll be making it as clear as we can with funders around telling them the story about what this platform is intended for, which is really to support those smaller groups, those tier 4 charities, and being clear in our communication that you're going to see difference in the quality the quality of applications, and that's something that funders should consider. I can't speak on behalf of funders particularly, but I do know that that's something that a lot of them do consider as best they can, in terms of knowing that some groups, don't have that capacity to write, or to write something at all, perhaps. So that's why we're trying to enable things like video applications and that kind of thing. Rochelle's got her hand up there, I see.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask about what kind of guidance there might be available for the charities who are putting up their profiles. So at the very beginning, like, is there some kind of guidance that Match will have, some kind of go-to, resources about here's the process, this is how you do it. Also, maybe these are the kind of things you could ask for as well, because I think sometimes it can be tough to know actually what to ask for funding.
Yeah, that's a great point, Rochelle. Yeah, there will be some resources that we put up to, step by step, even before you start, perhaps like this is the information that you'll be asked to provide. So, these are some things that you might like to consider, or things you may need to get ready. Yes, so we'll be providing some basic resources there, basically to help charities, again, before they have to commit too much to the process, understand, hey, is this for me or not? And yeah, as best we can, assist in terms of, here are some examples of successful strategies, or strategies that are typically well received by funders, and might be advice in terms of, what's an appropriate amount of funding to ask for if you haven't been funded by them before, or things like that. So yeah, I don't want to overpromise there, because that's something that we'd like to provide, but we have yet to kind of decide exactly how we communicate that. And again, I think in the end, we're going to be reliant on other partners, some of those ones that I've mentioned before, or organizations that are operating in similar spaces. So yeah.
Thank you. If you have any last questions, now's the time. And while you type them or think of them, just a reminder that we'll be sending we'll be having a recording of this webinar, but we'll also be sending a follow-up email with the link to the Match's newsletter, and also to join our Mema Whanuatanga if you haven't already. But we're also wanting you to participate in a survey that will take you less than 2 minutes, I promise, just about the webinar, if you find it useful, and if you have any recommendations as to what we should discuss or what speakers we should bring for the next webinars that we have.
And if there are any other thoughts or ideas that you have post this session in terms of Match as well, then feel free to reach out to our team through Philanthropy New Zealand's website, or the link that's Aotearoa will provide. So.
And Match are very active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all the social media. So show them some love, share, let more people know, because these are the groups that we need to know more of. They're the ones who usually don't have the access to these advertisements and social media. Will you be emailed to sign up once? If you sign up to the newsletter, from my understanding, they will get a notification when the platform is live. Yes, Owen?
Correct. Yes, we'll probably send out a notification. We at the moment, it's been like a monthly newsletter with updates and that kind of thing. We'll probably send out one in a couple of weeks prior to launch on the 28th, and then another one on launch or something. So yeah.
Well, if there are no more questions and you've done the survey, please, we'll close with the karakia, and we'll stop the recording, but it's just a reminder that the space will be open for another 30 minutes. So if you want to stay and have just a casual conversation, please do. Rania, over to you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. He mihi nui tēnei ki a koe Owen, ki tō kōrero I tēnei rā. Thank you so much, Owen, for coming to join us for this webinar. It's been really, really great to hear about Match and what it will provide for small to medium organisations, community groups especially. So we're really excited to have you with us today. So I will finish us off with a karakia whakamutunga. Kua mutua mātou mahi, mō tēnei wā, manaki tia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hua, o mātou whānau, ai au ki te aorangi. Kia ora koutou katoa.